Can you hear me, Anne-Marie?
Yep.
Okay, hi Linda. Hi Anne-Marie.
Hello.
You good? Yeah, I guess. Picture's good.
If you need anything, I'll
Thank
be in the tech support adjunct
Thank you. Down here or upstairs?
upstairs.
Okay. If I need you, I'll text you.
That's great. Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Sorry about that. I was sitting there and I'm all by myself and went out and checked and I had reopened the Board of Health meeting. So
Oh, well, how did that go, by the way?
it actually went well. Good discussion about vaccination and the challenges of vaccination.
Oh, good.
Oh.
Hello, Dennis,
Hey,
Linda,
Rob.
Kevin,
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Khalil, Tim. So we're all here. And I'm late, so let's call the meeting to order. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes that we've got, which are now the December 11th, December 15th, and January 19th?
Unfortunately, I didn't realize they were there and I just printed them out just now, so I haven't had a chance to review them.
Okay,
I'll go with the majority.
and that's reasonable. Anne-Marie, what's the best way for us to close out the minutes? Maybe individually send you or Janine corrections?
Either that could happen, but then council would do the final approval of the minutes.
Sounds good. So why don't we ask everybody to review the minutes, send any edits to Janine, and then our council will take them up and close them out, because this is our last meeting.
Right. Another option would be to have another meeting, 10 minutes, just for the purpose of doing the minutes next week. I don't know. I just throw it out there for thought.
We could do that.
That way council wouldn't have, we would all have an opportunity to speak about them that way.
Well, you'll have the opportunity. Okay, well, let's.
So would we have to post the meeting if we did that?
Hmm.
Maybe we could pick a date and time next week and do it in 15 minutes.
Well, then we'd have minutes of that meeting too.
Yeah, then we have minutes of today's meeting.
But that would be at least a very brief set of minutes rather than you've got several sets of meaty minutes.
Well,
Meaty.
Dennis, the problem is that we've got two sets of minutes that haven't yet been even drafted. One is the 14th and one is today's, which haven't even been created. So I think we need to put it out, not just next week, but sometime after that.
Okay, well, and that way we could do all 5 minutes at one time, including a report.
How do other people feel about that? You okay just submitting them to Janine, or would you rather have a separate meeting to address minutes?
I personally think it would be safer to do it, a meeting, and all of us address them at the same time. That's my thought. I'll go with whatever the majority wants to do.
I'm pretty indifferent.
I have no problem with that.
Rob gave us an either or, so I was just,
Is there a third alternative?
no, I just want to know, make sure which one of the two are we agreeing to?
Right.
We haven't yet.
Do you want to do A or B? Yes.
I
Yes,
think it's
exactly.
probably
Thank you,
better.
Marie. Thank you. The only thing I think it would make great sense to be able just to submit them in. It might make it easier for all of us. Everybody spent a lot of time on this, I know. The only thing I know is what happens if there's a disagreement on what was said. So
Well,
I
the
didn't know-
tape would probably settle it.
No, okay, so we want to, then I would prefer not to have another meeting if at all possible. So if we could submit it in and then there's just, and then the committee would agree to work via email on any differences, that would be great.
Okay,
Yeah, we'll have to be a little careful about FOIA in working on differences. We'll have to do
I'll
it.
defer to you on that, Rob, but I just wanted to
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
make it easier for all involved.
Let's do that. So, so Janine will get our markups, and if there's differences, she'll appeal to the audio tape, and then and let council know what changes have been made. I'll let the committee know what changes have been made.
okay, I'm okay with that. But my other question is that Hoyle. I know we've had this issue before, and when we addressed it, I think I recall that we were told we couldn't do it that way.
You can't vote to approve them by FOIA, but if there are corrections and you submit them to Janine, that's not a FOIA issue.
Okay, and then how would they be approved?
They would go onto a council agenda for council to accept them.
Okay. All right,
All right. Well, let's go on to the main item on the agenda. And that's to discuss, review, and decide on the draft report. And I'm going to, at the risk of not seeing everybody's face, I'm going to have online a copy that I'm going to work from as we talk.
Rob, could I ask a question on this? Just,
Please do.
I know you've sent out, you sent on an original draft of the recommendations, I believe, on Friday, and a
Right.
second version shortly thereafter. There's a version that was on the website, and it's formatted a little differently. And so some things are on different pages. And so the only wanted to know is, as we proceed now with corrections or whatever, right, new ideas, which document should we be referring to so that everyone is working off the same document?
I can't really give you guidance on that, Kevin, except to suggest that we maybe use the section headings. as
Okay,
Our,
that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we were clear.
yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you, sir.
All right, what I've actually done, I've got a a draft in front of me that I hope I can turn into our final product to distribute for committee review. Is and what I've done is, for ease, because I couldn't integrate everybody's changes into one document. We've had a lot of so I've gotten a head start by using basis for the next iteration, which I hope is the final. So I am starting at the top, and I don't see any proposed changes.
I'm having a little trouble hearing Rob now.
I'm sorry. Is that better, Kevin?
Yes, I'm sorry, Rob. You were cutting in and out, sir.
I'll just try to project better. I have no edits to address. I thought we'd just go through the document, address edit by edit, and then discuss them as they came up. And I've got nothing showing until the section formation of this committee, where Kevin, I'm sorry, I misspelled your name at one point, and I've taken out one of the ends.
I'm sorry, someone was dialing in and I lost the thing, but thank you. Thank you.
Otherwise, I spelled it right. I apologize for that mistake.
Rob, we all know I've had issues with names throughout this entire experience. So the last to throw, I was going to call you Roy for the entirety of the meeting, but I decided not.
All right. Then we're in the survey section. And there's a substantial amount of edits in the that Kevin has suggested, or Kevin and Dennis. Kevin, I see your hand in this. And shall I
You will be surprised to note, Rob, that this was actually Dennis. I thought he
Okay.
did a better job than I attempted. So this is Dennis.
So in case anybody in the audience is following along, and just for the benefit of us all, in the section entitled Survey, there's a paragraph, about the third one, beginning, the committee began undertaking. And Dennis's suggestion here was to change the sentence beginning on December 2nd so that it would read as follows. On December 2, Kevin McGinnis reviewed the City of Lewis policy with an effective date of April 2018, which indicated that any existing impediments to parking along the shoulder off of the pavement within the right-of-way will be reviewed by the city staff to determine if practicable to remove. He further indicated that this committee should not be expected to make recommendations about the specific impediments that need to be removed, as it is the work of the city, its staff, and city council, as the city has already indicated, period. Dennis's edit would continue by deleting the however clause that lasts until the end of the sentence for several lines, and would then insert a new sentence reading as follows. Kevin McGinnis then made a motion to propose that we stop the current use of our limited meeting time to review our notes on the city's survey, comma, share the information we have gathered with the city, comma, and use the remaining meeting times to clarify our goals for the committee and develop recommendations that address the issues identified by council so that we can address, comma, as best as possible, comma, all issues that could impact public parking on all of Lewis Beach, period. The motion passed by a majority. Dennis's edit would continue by deleting the next two sentences. What I'd like to do is to address each edit and see if we have a consensus on it. Does anybody wish to discuss this substantial edit?
I can comment as to why it's so long, because I thought that it was very important to get Kevin's comments prior to the motion, so it would set the stage for the motion. And I think the combination there lays out very carefully what was discussed and what the motion was.
And I had tried to do the same thing, Dennis, by actually quoting him in his exact words, but whichever, I have no problem with your rewording of it.
Anybody else?
So do we need to make motion, Rob?
I don't think we need to. We can proceed by consensus. We've done that pretty well. So if there's no objection to that, then we'll adopt this, and I'll mark this to be entered in.
So
And
this would be consensus on this edit?
it sounds like it to me.
I support it.
All right.
Carl, Linda, you guys want to, Tim, you guys want to weigh in?
I think it's a little more detailed. I think it's, I support it. I think there's just a little more information in there.
Thanks, Linda. Khalil, did you have any comment on it?
You're muted. Okay.
Oh, I don't. I'm actually, to be frank, I'm trying to find it. This is what I was
It's
concerned
page
about.
3.
I know,
Khalil's page, oh,
But I think I have the wrong,
iteration.
yeah, the wrong version. I don't,
Well, the trouble with doing this by Zoom is that we can't all be in the same room with the same paper in front of us.
Rob, do you want me to put the version that you're looking at up on the screen?
Oh, yeah, but you have that, don't you?
I
Emma?
do.
That'd be great. If you could just put that section up, then
Thank
that's
you.
all we
That-
want to
That
look
might
at.
be helpful.
Good idea.
I just got to figure out which one it is because I've got a bunch
I think it's
floating
number
around
3.
here. Okay, got it. Got it. I have way too many things open. Sorry. There we go.
Anne Marie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Bring to your attention, since you're the meeting coordinator here, I have a daisy chain spinning in the middle of my screen that says waiting,
Oh,
and I don't know what that means. I've never had that before in a Zoom.
it might be, there could be a slow connection on your end or something.
Oh, okay.
Try-
Okay. I'm not going to jump out because I don't want to lose, but I just thought I'd bring that to your attention.
We can hear you, Tim, so it's,
And see
Yeah.
you.
And I cannot see you, the Brady family. I don't see you all on my screen.
okay.
No,
So
Tim, I had the same problem on my iPad.
Yeah, okay.
So there's the language that we just consensus to adopt. Anybody want to spend time on that one?
No,
Okay, Linda, thanks. So Anne Marie, if you take that off, because we're working from different versions. We're
Take
not-
this version off.
Yeah, take that version off and we'll
Okay.
come back to it.
Okay.
But
And then what version are we putting up?
we're not putting up anything. We're
Okay.
talking through this.
Okay.
So now we're on the section yield signs, stop signs, and fire hydrants. And Dennis suggested deleting the very first words, also on December 2nd. Dennis, you may be right, they weren't in those minutes. Doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah, I think that was why I deleted that.
Yeah. Then I've got a couple of suggestions to propose here. The first is in the second paragraph, beginning the city adopted. The second sentence of that says the same distance is appropriate. What I really meant was the same action is appropriate. That is to mark the distance so that people know not to park there. Does anybody
Robin,
have-
Where are you,
Can
Rob?
I ask a question? Is this parallel to a discussion we had a couple of weeks ago? Are we talking about they're currently 30-foot setbacks from a stop sign on Cedar? Is this
Yeah.
now saying a 30-foot setback on the stop sign in between, at the end of a State Street before, when it reaches the intersection with Cedar? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Dennis, did you find this?
Yeah, I mean, I've got the yield signs. I'm sorry, I wasn't sure where on there you were talking about right now.
We're in the section called starting yield signs,
Right, I'm there.
second paragraph,
Second paragraph. Okay,
second sentence.
right.
Just change the word distance to action.
Same action as improvement stop times on the connector streets at Cedar and Bay.
Well, that's that's your suggestion.
Well, no,
I'm going to get to that.
Th-
First, let me address the change from distance to action. The idea is what we're trying to do is to suggest that it makes sense to mark 30 feet before the stop sign at Cedar so that people know not to park there.
well, I thought that we Tom Spell said that he would go with the city on whether or not to enforce that.
Hold on, I'm gonna promote the chief because that's not exactly what he said.
Well, let's hear it, because I don't remember anything where we agreed to put that in at every connector street, on the connector street as you approach Cedar.
Dennis, you may be right. I can't cite to you chapter and verse of the minutes, but in this meeting, we can also decide what's appropriate. So if it's appropriate to mark them the same way they're marked on Cedar itself, that would be a recommendation of the committee. Chief, can you help us understand your attitude towards distance, no parking distances on the connector streets from the stop signs at Cedar and Bay?
It's a state law, and I think I agreed that I wouldn't make it a priority for enforcement. As the police chief, I don't necessarily have the ability to direct my people not to enforce state law. But as a matter of, routine, I can, as opposed to directing people to go to that area to enforce this offense, I think it was more along the lines that I'm not going to make that a priority for enforcement.
Was there any distinction in your mind between the stop sign at Cedar and the stop sign at Bay?
By state law, no.
But what about I was asking in your mind as to discretion?
Again, the discretion is given to the certified police officer to enforce those laws, so I can't just automatically cancel that discretion. They get dispatched there because citizens are concerned, or they see something that they believe is unsafe, they have that discretion to enforce the state law. So discretion is one thing, a direction to not give it priority of enforcement maybe is a little different.
I'm not talking about discretion versus state law. I'm talking about a difference in your mind as to whether it would be appropriate to use discretion between Cedar and Bay. Dennis seems to remember that you would use your discretion or would accept an exercise of discretion as to both. I recalled it only as to Bay.
Dicey one.
Yeah, I'd have to, I don't have that conversation in front of us. I know, in real time today, when when the committee is formed and has lots of issues and is asking for more robust enforcement, it becomes more problematic, obviously. And then there's going to be the expectation of enforcing of the state law. And if you do it on one side of the block and 100 feet down the road, you don't do it, that could be problematic for us.
Okay, well, we don't want to spend a lot of time on this. So Dennis, are you okay with the change from distance to action first?
Yes, I'm okay with that.
And you'd like to add Cedar and Bay in the same
Now,
level?
well, if we're going to do it on one side, you have to do it on the other. And I know I brought up before that if you do that, you're possibly going to lose 2 parking places on each connector street, and there's about 22 connector streets. That's an awful lot of parking places.
How would
And
you
you
feel
have to
about,
mark them because there's nothing there now to say no parking.
how would you feel about deleting the sentence entirely?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
How would you feel about deleting the sentence entirely?
I would be okay with that.
Anybody disagree with that?
So we would delete, in essence, Rob, not just that sentence, but since the next sentence relates to it, we just delete the whole paragraph?
We would delete the next paragraph too. That's what I would suggest.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to delete second and third paragraph.
We're going to delete the second sentence in the second paragraph and the whole of the third paragraph.
Okay,
Or we could delete the second paragraph entirely too.
yeah, I think the third paragraph, there is no parking on Bay Avenue, so putting the yellow lines on Bay Avenue doesn't accomplish anything.
I think this is about putting the lines on the connector streets as they approach Bay Avenue.
Yeah, that's what we're deleting, that sentence there.
If we got consensus, I think I'm not hearing any objection. We're going to delete the second and third paragraphs.
Okay. Okay.
Then that takes care of that.
But you would leave intact the as to the 15-foot no parking distance from fire hydrant. That paragraph would.
I think that's actually useful
No,
information.
I'm not disagreeing with it. I just wanted to make sure it was
Right.
clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yes, sir.
And then there's a little bracketed note that I made to myself about needing minutes. I would delete that. We have them now. Then the next paragraph is parking on paper streets and open space lots. Anne Marie, may I ask you to put up Dennis's edits to that section? That doesn't look like Dennis's edits.
I think it's the next page. Anne Marie.
I think it's a different document, actually, Kevin.
Okay.
Make it right, Rob.
Yeah. On mine it's page 4, if that means anything.
Same on mine.
That's good. That's it. Good.
That's
Thanks.
it.
Yeah, this is bad. It saves my voice from having to.
Okay. Actually, Kevin and I, we both had changes in here. It reflects both of our changes.
Okay. Why don't we take a minute? Has anybody not had time to look at these? Because Dennis, I did distribute this to everybody, but I didn't give everybody a huge amount of time.
Okay.
Does anybody need more time to look at this? Thanks, Linda. Khalil? Khalil, you with us?
Yep,
Okay.
I'm reading. Yep,
Do you need more time to look at it?
just one more second.
Good.
Okay.
All right, Tim?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Is there anybody want to speak to these edits?
Sure.
I've
Go ahead.
I've got no trouble with them.
Okay.
Kevin and Dennis proposed them. Does anybody object to them? Then I think we've got consensus that we're going to be okay with these.
Okay.
Moving right along. Let's see, I think we're on survey of canal side streets. And Dennis, you made a comment in your edit that there was discussion but no motion on the survey. We did have consensus on it.
I don't recall that at all. I know we talked a lot about what would be done, but I don't think it came to a question of consensus or emotion. That's my recollection.
Okay, let me see if I can find what I'm referring to. Yeah, I've got on
Go ahead.
page 3 of the December 15th minutes. I'll just read it verbatim. Councilperson Morgan summarized the committee's recommendation that the city survey the right-of-way on the streets on the canal side of Cedar Street not including the survey that was done by the city on the paper streets before they were converted to open space. Action, Dennis Reardon made a motion to agree with what Councilperson Morgan said. The motion was seconded. All were in favor. The motion carried.
I stand corrected. Thank you.
So I don't think we have to, we did have consensus on it, or we actually had a motion on it. So then I've got a proposed correction to the last sentence. Let me read what I've got. And it's actually the last two sentences. What I would propose to say is, in October 2018, Atlantic had proposed $9,800 for the survey work and $2,700 for the staking of the canal side streets, period. Mr. O'Donnell obtained a revised estimate excluding the paper streets, which turned out to be higher than the 2018 quote, and now stands at $15,623.75, and then I spell out what the components of that were as Charlie gave it to us in his email. It's $11,463.75 for the right-of-way survey, $2,700 to stake out the improved streets, $1,460 to stake out the paper streets at Cedar Avenue only, total $15,623.75. Any objection to that?
Nope.
Rob, I think what you've done here on recreating the history is fine, but I hope that still does not preclude us when we get to the recommendations from revisiting this issue, especially now at the new price.
Sure.
There was additional discussions about how much it was needed, given some of those streets and so on. And I hope we can then have that discussion when we get to the specific recommendation.
By all means, Kevin, we'll get there. All right. Then criteria for applying policy. Could you put up, Anne Marie, Dennis's suggested additional sentence in that section?
Okay, that's up now. An opportunity was not provided. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, could you maybe scroll it down a little bit so we see the whole paragraph?
Yep.
Perfect. No.
Now, this is Kevin's, not mine.
Okay. Could you scroll it down a little
Not
bit?
that I don't agree with it.
So we see the whole criteria section?
Do you mean scroll up?
That's perfect. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, now we've got it. So let me speak to this. Since it's yours, Kevin, I'm not sure it's accurate, at least as I recollect. The opportunity was never denied to discuss other criteria. And I'm not really sure what it means.
I think what it means was we had a discussion where you had a list of topics you wanted to discuss. At different times, I and others raised related issues and were told that you wanted to work through your list first. We then, on the second meeting, a request was made if you could share the list in its entirety in advance of the meeting, we might be able to expedite it and get to other topics that were raised, that could be raised. You said that you couldn't do that at the time. So we continued on. There were other issues related to enforcement. There was a discussion about getting an explanation of the city's current enforcement of its current right-of-way policy. That was not provided, nor did we really have an opportunity. And I think reflecting this in this history that this occurred will help explain some of the reasoning behind the proposed changes that are coming up with regard to the specific recommendation you make on in the last section.
Well, let me reply to that. Personally, I think the sentence obscures more than it clarifies. Because when you asked, I remember, Kevin, you asked to share the list. I didn't have a list. So I couldn't share. I mean, I had a list of things I wanted to think about, but it was not a complete list. It was not an exhaustive list. It was not exclusive. And I never denied anybody the opportunity to raise another criterion. The explanation of the city's enforcement of the current right-of-way policy on Lewis Beach is easy enough. There isn't any. And it was never said that there was. The city hasn't enforced its right-of-way policy. That's the purpose of the first committee. And that's the purpose of the second committee, to figure out what it is. You recall that the right-of-way policy was adopted in April 2018. It had no specific criteria. Thereafter, the first committee was appointed. The first committee recommended that a survey be done before any enforcement was made. The survey was done. Our committee began work. So we're trying to come up with criteria. And finally, your last clause, specifically with regard to the city's ruling on the use of the policy, there's no ruling on the use of the policy. So that wasn't unprovided either. So I really think this isn't a very helpful sentence. It may arise from misunderstanding.
I don't think it arises from misunderstanding at all. I think it arises from concerns I've had and I have voiced throughout this entire session about confusion about the city's right of way. We've never had a statement from the city emphatically saying they have done nothing to enforce the right of way policy that was passed in 2018. We've also had some confusing interpretations, at least with regard to what date we want to apply or making it retroactive, as evidenced, I think, in some of your recommendations. I have no intention of spending a lot of time on this part. I'd rather we get into it, we address the issues. If you're finding this so confusing, Rob, we can address the issues when we get to the actual recommendation.
Well, let's do that. I'm hearing that you're willing to drop this sentence.
As a courtesy to you, Rob, I will, but I do not think it is misleading. I do not think it's inaccurate. I don't think it's confusing.
Well, thank you. I accept the courtesy. And please, Kevin, I hope you realize that I'm trying to extend courtesies too.
I do.
Thank you. Okay, then.
So that paragraph will stay as originally submitted. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Thank you. Okay, moving on.
So can you say, are we going to include Kevin's comments or not?
Say again?
Are you going to include Kevin's comments or not?
I think Kevin was willing graciously to recede from his added sentence.
Okay. Thank you.
Right.
Anne Marie, we're up to the paragraph on parking at beaches 1 and 2. Could you put that up on the, let's see now, is it already up?
It's up there.
Thank you. Let's take a minute and review this. This is also from Kevin and Dennis. Dennis, I take it this is more yours than Kevin's.
That would be correct, Rob.
So I'm going to suggest Dennis, that the part of the last 3 lines, everything beginning with the word based in your proposed addition, in the 3rd line from the bottom, middle of the line, additional parking based on the representation.
Oh, yeah.
I think that clause,
I'm not, wait, where are you?
3rd line from the bottom,
The sentence starts with your name, Dennis. It says
Yeah,
Dennis
I got
Reardon.
that. Made a
Okay,
motion
and
to
then,
recommend the city council that the parking lots is 1 and 2 not be expanded to accommodate additional parking based on the,
right there.
okay.
it seems to me that the language from based to the end of the sentence simply duplicates what you said earlier in the paragraph, that the city indicated that the restroom and beaches had reached capacity, and
Right.
that coupled with the environmental impact.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, that was the language that I put in the motion, even though it replicates what was above.
Okay, I thought maybe you
No, it was in the
got to
motion.
have it twice.
Yeah. I wanted to make it very clear that there's a standard set and that standard should be applied to the whole beach.
Okay. Anybody have a comment on this, on these edits?
Could you just, do we need, given the changes as I'm looking at them, do we need to say something about the fact that the motion was adopted?
That's a
I
good
believe,
point.
I believed it was unanimous, so I just thought we should maybe reference it. It says a motion was made. I think we should just say the motion was.
That's a good point, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. We could just say motion carried.
What,
Or you could say a motion was made and approved.
Motion made and approved, okay.
we have,
That's fine.
we have the Dennis making the motion. So I'll add the sentence, the motion carried unanimously.
perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yes, sir.
Anybody object to this, to adopting the edits that we just discussed?
No.
Nope.
No,
Rob, it was pointed out to me that there are some people in the chat later.
I just want to get through this,
Okay.
Dennis, before we take questions in chat. I hope we have time at the end to take them. They've been useful in the past, but this is our last meeting. So we're on to parking permits. Here is where we've got Khalil's edits. Can you put those up, Anne Marie? It's quite a juggling act I'm asking, I know. Yeah, there you go.
I'm impressed.
Right.
Okay. Rob, do you just want me to simply go through this and give my edits and explanations?
By all means.
Okay. So at the beginning, I simply wanted to highlight that this was a seasonal parking permit policy as opposed to a parking permit system. So I made a change there. I wanted it reflected in there that my proposal of the parking permit policy was in response to Lewis residents expressing concern. And I certainly wanted to credit them for raising this issue, and this just wasn't me in a vacuum coming up with this policy. So, which is why I added that sentence there. Moving on to the next paragraph, my original language had said that the parking passes would be issued free. I changed that to could be issued free to all Lewis homeowners within the city limits. and or for a fee. And then I added the language about the mayor and city council determining whether a revenue stream is needed to implement the program. So those were some changes there. I eliminated the part about each household receiving one sticker per registered vehicle, simply because, I don't think we didn't really discuss it. That's kind of detailed. That's probably more suited for the council if they choose to take this up. And then on the last edit there, I want to make it clear that, there's been some questions and chats and others about Lewis homeowners looking out for their own interests at the expense of visitors. And I wanted to make that clear that that's not the case. And that, we are adhering to the Warner Land Grant, and that, passes would be available for visitors to purchase or park if there is no fee. And so I wanted to make that clear. And I think that explains that. Everything, some of the key points in favor of it are listed, which I didn't touch. And Anne-Marie, can you scroll up a little bit? I just want to see the bottom. I don't think, I made some changes here. That's right. This was more wordsmithing than anything else, just to kind of highlight the fact that the original proposal that I had sent to mayor and council talked about this being more of a short-term solution, and maybe a long-term solution would be jitney service and things like that. We never discussed that in any of our meetings, a jitney service. So anything, I just wanted to keep this. So my comments and changes there are designed to kind of focus strictly on the parking permit proposal and not other potential parking solutions.
Okay. Anybody have any comments on Khalil's proposed edits?
I'm okay with them.
I'm supportive.
Anne Marie, would you pull down? I'd like to read the very first paragraph again. I don't have it on my computer. Hold on, let me see. All right, thank you.
Well, I wonder if we could consider two changes I think are very small to your proposed edits. One is, when I copied A through G, I somehow didn't make G a separate paragraph, and I would just propose to correct that. And the other,
Okay, that's
then the
that's
other is that in your sentence in the following paragraph, the committee discussed the merits and unanimously recommended that mayor and council consider a parking permit policy. Then just 2 paragraphs later, again, we say we recommend that the city consider the proposal. So we say the same thing in 2 different ways. Would it be possible to combine them, or at least to put them in the same place?
I certainly don't want to be repetitive. Asked if the rationale, let me read this quickly.
Yeah, take your time.
Rob, can I just make sure I understand something? I believe that when we did this, there was a motion and it was voted on.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting that you take out the paragraph before, it's the paragraph preceding Mr. Morgan asked? The last sentence, the committee discussed the merits, unanimously recommended the mayor and the city council consider a parking permit policy, and maybe make that the end? Is that what you're recommending?
Now I'm a little lost, Kevin. Can you explain that
Okay.
again?
Sure. The paragraph starts, Mr. Saliba regarded such a system as necessary to protect the quality of life and promote safety for families, friends, and visitors alike. The next sentence is the committee discussed the merits and unanimously recommended the mayor and city council consider a parking permit policy.
Yes,
That's sort of, in a normal sense, is sort of the end point. Would you agree?
right.
So is that what you're sort of suggesting, is to take that sentence and perhaps the committee, you go down to the very last paragraph now, it says the committee agreed that the devil was in the details, but say the committee unanimously recommended.
Yeah, exactly. I'm
I was
suggesting,
just trying to work to what I thought you were trying to do, Rob, on this one.
yeah. I'm suggesting they be combined, and I'd take anybody's suggestion on combining them. At worst, we could just put them together. Perhaps the sentence to be moved could be the last one. In other words, the last paragraph would read, the committee agreed that the devil was in the details, but that the city should seriously explore the proposal with citizen input. Where'd it go?
Motion was presented and approved unanimously.
Yes,
Yes, that's fine. I just think it's more important that there's some reference that there was a motion and it carried unanimously. It's different than urging the city to think about or explore or think about. I think it's a little bit more specific.
that's good. Okay, I will note that move to end after. Okay. Wait a minute. Thank you. I've got that. So let's see. I think we've got a couple of minor editorial suggestions. After parking permits, we go to beach capacity. It was Dennis's or Kevin's suggestion that in the 7th line beginning beach, that we delete the word anyway that follows. I have no problem doing that. Is anybody go on? Next section is mailbox clustering. And I don't think we need to put it up unless Anne-Marie has it up. No reason to. The proposal was in mailbox clustering, in the first line after the word mailboxes, to add, which was a recommendation of the first beach parking committee. Any objection to that?
No,
No,
Nope.
Is there, I don't have any objection to it, but what are we gaining by making that insertion?
We're putting pressure on Anne-Marie.
Okay. I'm all about that. That's fine with me, right, Anne Marie?
She's gone quiet.
Sorry, I was muted. I was going to say now it's going to get a unanimous vote.
Yeah, we're not going to settle for consensus.
Then
Thank you. Go on.
signage is the next, where we had the suggestion again from Dennis and Kevin. Could you put that up?
this is mine, Rob, if it helps. We actually have a motion made and a motion voted on. And I just thought the inconsistency with an emphasis on that is all what the motion actually says.
Well,
So I thought we should reference that, those three components in this paragraph.
does anyone have an objection to making Kevin's edit?
No,
Hearing none, that goes in. Our next section is enforcement. And again, this is Dennis and Kevin. Let me pause a moment so people can digest it. Speaking for myself, the addition at the end isn't that clear to me. Can somebody explain what was intended?
Be happy to. The language we talked about this when we actually had this discussion, and you twice tried to take the enforcement. As you know, I had made a motion in shared language with what I was trying to do and made it more into a recommendation on hiring. And my assumption is I thought we should be careful about tying enforcement to hiring. Instead, have enforcement be a policy of the city. I don't want us to be recommending how many people to hire or who to hire or issues like that, which I don't believe many of the members of this committee have much information on. So I was trying to address, I would be happy if it would be acceptable, we could strike all of the last sentence.
It's acceptable to me.
Okay.
What do others feel? Do we want to say that we want more personnel, or do we want to just be silent on that? Well, let me ask it this way. Does anybody object to deleting the last sentence?
I do not.
I do.
Linda does.
No, I do not.
Oh,
I
you do
don't
not?
object.
Okay, thanks. Khalil?
Good.
All right, out it goes. Let me make sure I get that. Thank you. All right. The next is alleys. And again, there's a requested edit from.
I just want to be clear, Rob. I just wanted to raise this with you. This was mine. I'm not emphatic on this, but in addition to some of the issues you raised, in the interest of time, I did not get into it. But since you then went ahead and included an alley recommendation, my concern was we didn't have an opportunity at that meeting to go into other issues because of time that I think impact this decision. And I will specifically share that when we lived on East Canal, there is technically an alley between East Canal and Massachusetts. It has been built over, it has been dealt with, but still the building inspector at the time attempted at one point to enforce that alley right of way. I think these issues have to be much better understood when we start talking about policy with regard to alleys, and we've had an opportunity to do so in this committee. Again, I'm not going to be, follow my sword over this one, but I just wanted to explain or give some heads up as to why I would be voting against the recommendation that's upcoming.
Okay. I think the added language under alleys is not, I doubt it's a problem to anybody. Let me ask you about, since we're talking about alleys, jump ahead to the recommendation, which is the last one. Do you think there's anything we should ask the city to think about with respect to alleys? Should we ask the city to think about alleys?
well, when if I could, I was
Number
looking at
16.
the minutes from the January 19 meeting, and we discussed it. And Anne Marie suggested that the committee would suggest addressing the issue, then at some point people would demand that these alleys would be improved. The city would not use an unimproved alley for a trash truck. However, there are a few places where this is necessary, but this is not the norm. the adjacent property owners do not keep their alley trimmed, then the city can send them a notice to require them to do so. Unless the city needs the alley for a purpose it doesn't maintain them. I would suggest that we discussed it, and based on that, I'd say just let the city decide what they want to do with the alleys. I'm the one that put the last few words on there, that this would be a matter for the city to consider. And I'd like to suggest that we let that go back to the city for them to decide.
How does the rest of the committee feel?
I agree
Fine.
with that.
I
Yeah,
agree
I don't
with that.
think, we didn't really spend any amount of quality time to actually make any kind of recommendation on that, in my opinion.
Thanks, Khalil. Linda, do you have a thought on it?
I think alleys sound like a hot potato for a beach committee. Sounds more like a city problem.
Okay. Tim?
Yeah, we can do it as at a council level. That's fine.
Okay, so I think we've jumped ahead. Does anybody have a problem with the words that Kevin and Dennis suggested there? Hearing none. Let me just mark that. And I think we've also agreed to drop the last recommendation in the current draft.
Okay.
All right. Sorry for all this, the rustling of paper. Trying to keep up with two drafts. Well, now I think we're at what promises to be an interesting discussion. We're on recommendations. And let me see if I can more or less, let me get rid of this. Summarize where I think the edit suggests leaving us. Let's tackle them one by one. And when we get to the criteria, I think is where more discussion would be appropriate. So, recommendation number 1 appears to be agreeable to everybody.
Can we move down to the recommendation? I don't see it on my screen.
Anne Marie, can you help us there?
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
There you go.
Then, so number 1 is good. Number 2, I think we're gonna drop based on our earlier discussion. Likewise, number 3. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So we eliminate those. Okay.
And 4, I think nobody had a comment on. 5, Dennis, in light of the December 15th minutes, are you okay with this?
Yeah,
Wait,
Okay.
wait a minute. I'd like, are we on the survey, the streets?
Yes.
Yes.
I propose, based upon the new price, that we don't survey the streets. I think there has been discussion around those meetings, and I know this is different from what was voted on at the time, Rob. I just think, given that the additional information is provided, I think with regard to all of the overall parking issues, the $15,000 could be better spent on other things. So I would recommend we delete this number 5. What number is it now? 3, 5,
Probably.
5? No.
3.
5.
It's
It's
5.
5.
5 on the version.
It's the
Amber.
new 3.
Yeah.
number 5 on the screen.
Right.
So, Charlie, what is the difference between the the estimate that Atlantic gave us in 2018 and the estimate now?
Let's see, roughly $3,000. And that comes with a bit of explanation in that when Atlantic originally did their proposal, they used as their backbone, so to speak, the Cedar Avenue right-of-way survey. And they were then basing the connector streets and the streets heading towards the canal as secondary surveys after they had established the points out on Cedar Avenue.
Right.
So we kind of skipped by the Cedar Avenue survey, so they would then have to establish those 2 points at every single side street leading to the canal on Cedar Avenue that were originally in the Cedar Avenue survey portion of their proposal. So that's the reason why the price went up.
Okay. So it's between 12,000 something and 15,000 something is the move.
Yes.
In the December 15th meeting, I think there was, nobody was against this. We've had a lot of requests to get this done from citizens who, especially those who live on the Bay side.
Yeah.
Who are thinking that. So my own inclination, Kevin, is that 3,000 is not a lot of difference to sway our earlier thinking the opposite way. But what is the committee's feeling? Is there a consensus one way or the other? Let me ask you, Khalil, how do you feel? Rather than
Well,
you last.
I'm not, based on how we treated the right of ways on the state streets, and I'm not sure by reviewing and identifying the right of ways on the city side streets, what value that's going to offer us. In that, isn't there possibly a cheaper way or a more pedestrian way to kind of identify eligible parking spots, legal parking spots, without having to do a right-of-way study?
Well, how would you know that you're not taking private land?
How would you? Right.
I mean, just to use an example, on my street and in a few streets down from me, I mean, it is, I'm suspecting we're going to have parking on probably one side only, like it is on most stateside streets. And if that's the case, there's just identifiable by the eye. There's no need to reclaim any right of ways. There is ample parking right there on the street. It would just have to be designated. Now, that's my thinking. I mean, and I'm looking at this pretty much from a cost perspective. I'm not sure $15,000 needs to be expended when, for example, Dennis Ritter and I walked a few streets a month ago. It was pretty easy to identify where there was, available parking. But but I'm not going to be the person who holds up a right-of-way study, because we probably need it for the future anyway. If that's the.
Tim, what's your feeling?
Did you call on me?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we need to remind ourselves that this is simply a recommendation to council. It does not mean that we are committing city money to actually accomplish a survey. This is the last meeting for this committee. This is not going to be, the results of a survey are not going to be realized by us serving on this committee. So I think that it only makes sense that if we are going to act on some of the other recommendations that have been made by this committee, and we think we might be approving, is those recommendations are dependent upon identifying parking on the canal side of Cedar. And therefore, I think that we're going to have to eat the cost, expect to have this cost of doing a proper land survey so we can properly identify our opportunities for parking on the canal side. Well, you know, yeah, that's my thinking. I think we should go with, I think we need to include this in the recommendations.
Linda, how do you feel?
I think we should include it in the recommendations, you know, for the city to consider. I don't know what the city's budget is, if the money's there. But if the money's there, I think it would be to our benefit to have it done.
Right. You have to remember, folks, that the first committee made the recommendation, I believe it was in 2019, and the actual survey work wasn't done until 2020. So it was just a recommendation. It was a benchmark, so to speak. It was a foot in the door to suggest to the council that for a more robust analysis of our options for parking between Bay and Cedar, we needed to have a land surveyor conduct a survey. That was their recommendation. And the city acted upon that recommendation. The council did, committed the money, and that survey was completed.
Kevin, does 3,000 continue to sway you?
I don't think it's the 3,000. I think it's the total number, Rob. And no, it does not.
Meaning that you're okay with the recommendation, or?
Oh, no, meaning that I still, I have recommended that we removed this recommendation.
Okay, so that's but am I misunderstanding you, or is it the 3,000 that's making you change your mind from December 15th?
The change is part of the decision, as part of my concern. I think when we look at the totality of what we're recommending, the totality of all of these proposals, I'm going to stay with the recommendation we not commission this survey.
Okay.
Again, as Tim indicated, the city could so choose to do it. I just don't think it fits within these recommendations I'm hoping we're going to adopt at some point today.
I hope so too. Dennis, how do you feel?
I'm torn on this one. I think that if the money's there, it might help out. As Khalil said, he and I walked several of these streets, and the ones we walked would be very easy to identify where you could park adjacent to the paved surface. And it may not be a wise idea to spend the money to do that if the city could work it out. If in fact we do proceed to say, do the survey, the caveat that I would recommend we add to that is that once the survey is done, the city use their current policy to determine how they would handle parking places and recovery of encroachment.
So did you walk Houston Avenue by any chance?
No, that's not. No.
Because I heard Khalil say that on his street there's not a problem. I've heard from people in Houston that they think there is on theirs, in terms of having adequate width for both vehicles and parking.
I've heard that comment on a couple of streets, but I went and looked at the ones that I heard the comments on, and I've seen cars parked on both sides where a car could get down the middle. So I think probably somebody would have to go back and measure them to see whether or not that would work. If it was, why do it if it's not necessary?
Well, why it's necessary would be so that a future committee or the council or a city employee would be able to make an assessment based on fact, not on conjecture.
Tim, I was referring to like Houston and Rehoboth, those streets where there are paved and they have a curbing on them. And those you could measure to see if you need to, what you're going to do there. You may have to put no parking on one side, but those streets, I believe, have curbs on them. It's not like the rest of them where they're just grass or uneven.
Well, it's a little bit hard to figure out whether we've got 3 opposed or not. So because we've got much to get through, I'm going to ask for any opposed to this recommendation just to raise their hands. And since I can't see your hands all at one time, you could say something.
And Rob, to make it clear, would you please state what we are opposing? The recommendation is to what? To do what?
Rob, I think I can perhaps make this easier for your vote. What if I move that we eliminate recommendation currently number 5 to survey the streets between Cedar and the canal?
Thank you, Kevin. That's cleaner. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to go with it. I'm in favor.
So there's 3. All opposed?
Aye.
And Linda, were you an aye? Were you opposed to the eliminating the recommendation?
I'm not sure. I mean, to me, a recommendation means that the city doesn't necessarily have to do it, right? I mean, they could, after discussion, they
right.
could decide that it wouldn't be feasible.
Yep.
So you're opposed to removing the recommendation?
Yes.
So we got a 3-3 tie. I think what we're going to do is note that in the document, that this was not a committee recommendation, but a deadlock. Is that okay?
Okay.
That's fine. That's fine.
All right, thank you. Make a note of that. So then we're on to, let's see.
Number 6, right?
The mailbox.
Mailboxes.
Right.
And I think, do we have, Henry, are you still putting the
Up on my screen.
Khalil in? Good.
Rob,
So
this is my, I think this incorporates some language I had suggested. I'd be happy to speak to it if that would help.
please do.
I just wanted to include 2 things. As we learned when we were clustering mailboxes on Bay Avenue, they cannot always go where you think they could go based upon right of ways, city land, and so on. And so I just wanted to include 2 things. So the clustering would be where feasible, and where by clustering, you're creating additional parking spaces. Move mail, then go on. That's why I added the language. I thought it was important. We don't want to just necessarily do it to do it, but where it would result in the creation of additional space, then it would make sense.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay,
Anything else?
no, that's fine.
I like that language.
Anybody not like it? Okay, then I think we've got that adopted. Let me mark that. And then we're on to the criteria. Or either the criteria as I drafted them, or an entirely different paragraph as Kevin and Dennis, or I think Kevin and Dennis drafted it.
You can't see me, Rob, but I'm raising my hand. You can blame me on that one.
All right, I'll blame you.
Good.
Don't blame Dennis. He's innocent on this one. And again, Dennis, thank you for the courtesy of submitting mine. I was not in a position to do so yesterday.
No problem.
Kevin, do you want to speak to it then?
Sure. I thought that it was important that this committee referenced the existing current right-of-way policy and endorse its orientation towards prospective application and a limitation that to do so only where practicable. I also thought it was important that we make it clear, and I've listed what I think are the five, A, B, C, D, is that five of the five key elements or key operating principles. I'm a little concerned when we get into specific, some of the recommendations of that are Rob, that were ones and the ones you did, because I think some of these could be very, very arbitrary. So I think it's important that we focus on, you want consistency, you want the application to be perspective, you want consideration be given to the city's action with regard to the property on which the property owner may have relied. I think it's important that whatever is your policy that is implemented and enforced. And I thought, as we all had agreed to early on, we want to make sure that the policy result, if you're addressing it in a current impediment, that it, by addressing it, it results in a net increase in a parking spot. And then finally, I had some general language, which I think addresses some of the points you're trying to make without getting into tree diameters and things of this sort. And so that was the purpose behind this revised version.
Okay. I'm a little bit puzzled why the two can't coexist.
I don't want to chop down a tree because it misses something by a month or by an inch. I don't see anything on branches. I think I can point to multiple streets where branches are probably more of an issue than the tree. I don't know how this goes on. I don't think we as a committee need to be this specific with this specific regulatory language. I think that is more something the city can do via its rules or regulations. I think it's more important to state the broad policy issues which are laid out in the version I offered.
Let me give a little bit of context, by the way, to the policy, and then it's a good discussion to have, so let's have it. The policy was adopted in early 2018. The policy, I think anybody would agree, asks the city staff to use its discretion in where an obstruction should be removed. And that seemed, or it doesn't ask the city staff to do it. It doesn't yet define the criteria the city staff should use. So after the policy was adopted, that same year, a couple months later, the city created the first beach parking committee. That was to put flesh on the bones. And this first committee did put some flesh on the bones. But the first committee said, as far as the rights of way go, we need a survey. So, as Tim pointed out, it took a while, but we got the survey. And the second committee, our committee, waited until the survey was done until we started meeting. So there's been a sequence of trying to build on prior steps. The policy was the first step. The first committee was the second step. We're the third step. I don't think it makes sense to turn around and go back and say, all we want to do is the policy. So that's, I think the policies was good. It is good, but it needs flesh, and that's what we're trying to give it. That's what my perspective is.
Can I ask a question? With regards to the 2018 committee and its recommendations, I've been looking through my notes. I haven't found it. Was the recommendation, as I recall, that they would permit the removal of movable type objects? Wasn't there some criteria in there about what in terms of clearing right-of-ways or reclaiming right-of-ways, anything that was movable? Is that the word that
I'm going to look
used?
for it right now, Khalil. I've got it in front of me. I don't think they made such a specific recommendation, but it said number 5 was before the city can tackle the problem of obstacles within the street right-of-ways, it is important that the right-of-way lines be defined. Hence, the committee is recommending that a survey of the connector streets be made.
So there's nothing in there about, oh. Was that, then was that part of the policy that the city issued later on, that Kevin's referenced a few times?
Not later on, it was before that.
I believe the policy was enacted after that committee met.
The policy was actually before the committee.
Right.
And Anne Marie, does it mention like, movable objects or loosely, nothing like that? I thought it did. Okay.
I thought it did. So the primary things that are in there that have been consistently done is
Right.
that when a building permit is applied for, or when a lease extension is requested,
Right.
Anne
we
Marie,
evaluate for encroachments.
could I please just, Khalil, to your point on the 3/27/18 use of right of way and parking on Lewis Beach document, I think you're referencing number 3, property owners and tenants may not place chairs, cones, or any other type of movable object within the street right of way with the effect of impeding parking.
Okay.
It does mention it.
Okay.
But that's not objects in the right of way. That's objects that people put out to block parking in front of their houses.
Right.
Right. I think exactly, but movable objects was
Movable object within the street right of way with the effect of impeding parking. Right.
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 And Khalil, with
That was seen to also include like new landscaping stone and stuff like that.
What I was getting, yeah, people who, I mean, again, this is why I was very uncomfortable with that discussion all along, because of the arbitrary nature of trying to determine criteria. And it was just, as hard as I tried to figure out what would be movable, what would not be movable. And I just could not wrap my arms around a specific criteria that would end up being applied equally and fairly. I thought that it was just so difficult to come up with that. I actually like for the record, I like Kevin's language here on prospective, because I think that allows some notice to people, where now that they know where their right of way is, what they can and cannot do in terms of encroaching on that right of way. But I do think I'm not trying to be difficult. I've had a hard time trying to figure out how the city would reclaim right of ways without causing a firestorm and a whole host of chaos.
Khalil, what do you mean by prospective?
Yeah.
What does Kevin mean? Oh, Kevin, I'll let Kevin say.
Prospective.
No, I'd be happy to say it. I think we keep dancing
I was
around.
asking Khalil, Kevin, because
I
he
apologize.
talked about his understanding, his discomfort. What is it that you're anxious not to do as far as prospective goes?
Oh, prospective. I'm much more comfortable in that people now know, residents now know where their right of ways are, where they're designated. There are stakes to show that, and if somebody is purposely encroaching on that in order to preserve parking or anything along those lines, they now know that they're in the right of way. In the past, people didn't know. People were never told. People, we've discussed this. There was even construction as recent as 5 years ago where there were driveways, 20, 30 feet wide. And so I just feel it's fair to the residents that they have notice and understand where the boundaries were, and they never did. Nobody ever did.
Okay, so what about rocks that are put alongside the street so that people don't park there? That are already there. You'd be okay with leaving them there because that's not prospective?
At this point, yes, because I think we start looking at those versus someone who has rocks on their lawn, but they happen to be 3 feet within the right of way, as opposed to right next to the pavement. Me personally, I mean, I think it's an interesting debate. All I'm expressing is just, I don't feel comfortable or equipped to make those distinctions. That's all.
How would we become comfortable or equipped? Or are you saying rocks that are there now should just stay?
The cleanest thing that I could recommend is, at this point, everything is there, stays. But that, there is notice given to everyone that, anyone who, purposely or places anything within the right of way now is subject to having the city reclaim it. Now they know. But then again, I don't also want the city reclaiming right of ways just for the sake of reclaiming them. They have to have we have to have a reason that's either, to me, I don't think we need to reclaim right of ways if we can find ample parking spaces elsewhere. There's no reason to disturb someone or take someone's property if we can solve the problem anywhere elsewhere with parking. And that's where the capacity debate came in, trying to figure out how many spots we actually really need.
Thanks, Khalil. And Kevin, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I wanted to hear out Khalil on what he thought. Can you talk to what you had in mind?
Sure. I think that we've been having this discussion at various times throughout the entirety of this committee. We've never had a good explanation from the city about its policy. This not only goes with far as right of ways, but the building code and the application of the building code. I think all of us have seen, especially those of us who live here, encroachments are continuing on a daily basis. They're continuing today. Certificates of occupancy have been given on building sites where there are obvious encroachments even since we started this. Other encroachments, not necessarily with the right of ways, are known to the city. I think one of them is known to the entire city council, and that was given a certificate of occupancy, even though that involved literally scraping plants off a city property, incorporating it into a yard. I just think that it's not fair to have this discussion or get into this sort of specificity without acknowledging or addressing all of the things that cause this problem. Therefore, I think we go back to a broad statement of principles. I think it is an expansion. It doesn't get into the detail of what has been recommended by you, Rob, but I can't agree with some of the recommendations because I have no idea what are the practical consequences of anything of this specificity. Perhaps you have specific properties you want to target or trees you want to take down, or I don't know. But I just think this is not a smart way to go. That's why, again, think the committee, as we voted on before, should stick with its broad principles and leave the implementation to the city.
Kevin, let me remind you, though, that we did go through these items. Now, I think you've been particularly concerned about the trees and how to define whether a tree is small enough that it's new.
I think, Rob, if you go through that entire discussion, I don't know if that'll ever be reflected in the minutes, but I think on almost all of these, I made it clear to please not accept my silence as an indication of approval until I saw the actual language.
Okay.
I think I was very clear on that.
Okay. And as to the actual language, which you've had now, you don't like the one about the tree.
I would recommend, as I said earlier, to eliminate on your version A through, I guess it's A through G.
You don't like
is after mailbox have been clustered and the line of sight rate, if removing it. I think we've already addressed that one. I think this language is now repetitive. So I just think let's just focus on A through G. Yes.
Anne Marie, can you move the page up a little bit? Because all I can see is, there you go. Great.
And
Thank
Rob,
you.
I was referring to, and this gets awfully confusing with the way we're doing it. I was referring to, at the lack of more artful phraseology, your A through G, not my A through E.
I understand.
Does that make it as confusing as possible?
No, I'm clear enough. So having made that reservation, as you said, that you wanted to see the specific language, you don't like any of the language.
Correct. I think what I have proposed is expands the policy, supports and builds upon what I understood was a unanimous approval by the city council of this policy, and gives the city, puts the burden back on the city to start enforcing this. Absolutely. I'm not comfortable with, again, with the specificity of many of the changes you have in here.
All right. So let me, we heard from Khalil and Kevin. Linda, do you want to give your opinion about this? And when I say this, what we have is a proposal to delete the specific criteria and to replace it with a,
With my criteria as laid out in A&E. I hope, please don't editorialize on it. My criteria laid out through A&E.
I wasn't going to editorialize on it. I was going to say a proposal that has prospective application only and leaves it to the city to give specifics to the policy. Is that fair, Kevin?
I prefer to stand on the language that's been offered.
All right. Well, that's how I would regard it. So it's,
Rob, could I weigh in on this?
of course.
I agree with Kevin's comments and his changes. And for the same reasons that he and Khalil have stated, and I won't go over them again, but I would like to add to it that if this was a uniform situation over here, it's not, and I've said this several times, each one of these streets is unique in its own way. As it was built out, there was no rhyme or reason, no uniformity, and every street needs to be addressed on its own merits. And trying to put these criteria in here without looking at the total picture, to me, is missing the entire point. And I like very much, and we did earlier, as Kevin said, we agreed to leave this to the city to enforce their policy. And they can take a look at each street individually and decide what they want to do. So I agree very much with Kevin and Khalil.
Okay. I would point out that we did spend some time in our meetings on these and reach consensus on them. But if we want to now, we're perfectly free to discard them at this point and move instead to Kevin's formulation. Linda, is that what you would like to do, or do you like the criteria that we have, or do you like both?
I have no problem with Kevin's changes.
And the changes include adding and deleting.
Yes.
Jim, your thoughts?
Let's see. I'm hung up on the discussion that was part of our discussion that referred back to the description of movable objects. And I guess that what this is about, my comment is going to be focused on is the importance of word choice. And for you people who are on this committee who are attorneys, you'll appreciate this. I think I'm approaching the subject matter from the distinction between what is a movable object and what is a fixture. And it seems to me that in the policy statement that Anne Marie read or referenced, it was clear that lawn chairs, and other paraphernalia that was just put out in a right of way to block parking that is easily moved is a movable object, whereas the kind of rocks that have been placed in right of way to inhibit parking would be in fact fixtures. So possibly what we need to do is tidy up the language used in the policy, the city policy, and state that fixtures that have been placed in the right of way will be subject to being moved by the city.
That's a good idea. I
don't
think
know if
that's
need
more
to
than we
do
can
that.
tackle in this.
Doesn't the city have a right to do that now?
Yes.
I don't know why we would have to put it in here.
Well, let's refer back to the policy though. The policy describes it as movable objects. Right? And it was illustrated by objects that are hand carried and dropped at a location and easily moved.
I don't think what I have recommended, Tim, if I could respond, changes the policy whatsoever. As a matter of fact, it endorses the policy. It expresses our support for the current policy. So what is being recommended here is additive to the existing policy. It doesn't detract.
I think we have I don't know, Tim, how you're gonna come out on this, but my own feeling is that I can't agree to Kevin's addition or to the deletion of the specific criteria, which we spent time on and agreed to at the time.
Right.
So, but obviously we've got to change the report to accommodate the majority. What I am going to do is add a dissenting statement about my own view. And
okay.
Are we not a voice of one if the majority rules? Isn't that the way this should be?
and the majority is going to rule.
To object to a particular thing, they do a dissenting opinion. Why do we need a committee if everybody can do a report based on how they feel about this and disregard the majority speaking as one voice?
Not disregarding the majority. Dennis,
Yeah.
are you suggesting that I shouldn't give my view?
You give your view while we're discussing it. If we make a motion and vote on it, then the committee should go with that, whatever the majority is.
Well, that's your view, but dissenting opinions, I think.
They
So
are,
I would intend to make.
but not in committees. You do what you have to do, Rob, but I believe that you're undermining the value of one voice in a committee.
I won't be silenced, but thank you, Dennis.
Neither will I. Thank you.
So, do we have,
Well,
let's move on.
Make a motion. Hey, Kevin, how about making a motion?
We have consensus, but that's fine.
I thought Rob had sort of indicated he was accepting my version of A through E. So I didn't think a motion was necessary, but Rob, I'll defer to you.
I'd like to see a motion on the record.
Okay, I move that the committee adopt my proposed language for what is currently number, is it 6? Is it 6, Rob?
It is 6.
Okay, for number 6, as shared with, as has been shared with the committee, and remove from the proposed recommendation the former A through G.
I'll second that motion.
We've had plenty of discussion. Anybody want to say anything more about it?
I just want to ask one real quick question. Kevin, do you see any value in any of the original text that was provided? In other words, is there anything there that you would consider adopting to the 5 or 6 that you've put forward?
I think some of the other issues that are covered in other recommendations we're making, specifically with regard to safety and line of sight, and some of the other discussions we've already had. So I think this will be sufficient.
Okay, so on motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay?
I think I'm going to vote against this also.
Okay. So let me make a note of that.
That's 4-2.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was lively.
I got the blood pressure up.
I thought we all behaved with great decorum, Rob. I wish, I can't see anyone, so it would be nice to be able to see faces on this. But
I can't either, Kevin.
Let's see.
Rob, on the next one, if it helps, I thought with the change we just made with regard to mailbox clustering, this one isn't necessary anymore. Because
Now, I'm sorry, but which, can you give me a number?
Well,
Was
I think
8.
it's number 7.
So it's the one begins remove obstructions and beach access?
No, it's after mailbox have been clustered in the line of sight protected. If removing an obstruction will not allow creation of a parallel parking space, it should not be removed for parking purposes.
Yes.
I think we already covered that. with
You
the
already,
addition-
I think your motion covered G, A through G of mine. So
Oh, is
that's,
that, it's right, it covered A through G, and according to mine, the next recommendation is this one after mailboxes have been clustered.
okay, well, I see it as
Okay.
part of your motion is the way I saw it on screen. So
Okay.
anyway, since you want to delete it, I think it's covered by your previous motion.
Exactly. Thank you, sir.
Right.
Okay,
So we're moving on to the next one.
the next one is remove obstructions in beach access rights of way
Right.
if they would allow the creation of parking spaces. So, and was this your deletion also, Kevin?
I can't,
deleted that.
I think that, okay, it was Dennis.
Dennis,
I deleted that because my recollection was at our last meeting, we discussed that. And I brought up that I thought we should not do that. DENREC has to be involved. We haven't notified the people that live adjacent to those access points. And my recollection is that you said, Rob, that since we didn't have consensus on that, we would move on. And when I look at our January 19th minutes, that item is not included in the minutes at all.
I think you're right. I think the minutes did miss a couple of things. That's another reason to go back to them. So what's the best way to proceed on this? I think
Rob, can you explain, could you give an example of what obstruction you're trying to address?
Yeah, there'd be let's say a small evergreen. And sometimes there's brush that I've seen. And if we could clear away the brush, we could have some parking spaces. Sometimes the land goes up and it would be infeasible to park even if you did clear the brush.
I think the vast majority of beach access entrances, especially now that DENREC came and used a bulldozer this last year to open them up. I think that I just didn't see what we would be covering here, because all of those accesses have been expanded, and the overwhelming vast majority, except one or two, are built into dunes in some fashion or another. And so again, I was just trying to figure out what exactly this would be applicable to.
Kevin, I think that the only ones that the bulldozers went through were the emergency access streets. I don't.
Right. No, but I think you're right. You're right.
I think there's 7 of them that they did.
But they certainly cleared those spaces out.
Anybody else want to speak pro or con on this beach access rights of way recommendation?
I'll speak to it. I actually think that this is a pretty safe recommendation for us, for the committee to approve. And again, it is only a recommendation that we are making to the council, and it would be in the form of an option that we are placing in front of council for something for them to consider, to study further. They're not mandated. You're not telling the council what to do. You're simply pointing them in a direction of a possible, something to consider. And that's all. So I personally don't see anything wrong with including the original text that is in this, in our recommendation.
I think that we need to go back and look at the minutes, look at the audio, because I'm really sure that that was not the conclusion of the group. And again, I emphasize that two real estate agents, the two primary agents, Leanne and Nick, both indicated that if you put parking in there, it's going to devalue the properties. And I don't know what would be gained by it if, other than parking places. And mine's like that, and I don't have any problem with it, but I saw examples of where two exact same lots next to that, the value of the houses sold was like $300,000 to $400,000 difference. Same size lot, and both houses were taken down.
But Dennis, I'm going to remind you, the value of property is not the concern of this beach parking committee. Okay, we are not studying
this happened to you.
beach
You wouldn't,
property values.
you wouldn't be upset. Holy
I'm
mackerel.
not, Dennis, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it's not under our purview, okay? That's all. It's a public right of way, and we have the responsibility to make sure that the public has use of that right of way.
Okay.
But all of the beach access paths are on city property. Is that not right?
Correct.
That's
So-
correct.
So the city has the authority to do that already, correct?
Correct.
I think my general understanding is, and this is just an understanding, I cannot reference any code or any citation at all, but it's my understanding that there typically is a practice of at least a dialogue with subject matter experts who work at DENREC to confer with them before any kind of change is made in that dune area, that fragile dune area between bay and the water's edge. That's my general impression.
Tim, I'm in the interest of time, because we still have a little bit to go.
Please, go ahead.
Is there a motion to strike the recommendation to remove obstructions in beach access rights of way if they would allow the creation of parking spaces?
Yes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Yes,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
I hear four I didn't hear Khalil. Khalil, do you have a vote on this?
Yep, I support that.
Okay. Opposed? I'm opposed.
I'm opposed.
Okay. Got it. Then the next one is, I think it's about paper streets. I think the recommendation as I drafted it, let me speak to it, was to consider and possibly act on the issue of parking on paper streets and former paper streets. That was, I thought, consistent with your motion, Dennis, that this committee not make a recommendation on
So
the issue.
specifically, the language in my recommendation was the paper streets on Cape Penn Lopin Drive. Those words are in the motion. We did not make any motion regarding the paper streets on Cedar.
Yes, there was a consensus at the,
There was a discussion, but I don't believe there was any consensus.
there was, I remember it, and we can go to
We
the minutes if you'd
disagree.
like, but what I recall was that I said, is there any point in formally moving on this, or is the committee in agreement that they would vote the same way? Everybody said yes.
You asked me if I would make the same motion as to those streets. I don't believe that we went into that detail.
Well,
And if you like, in interest of time, I'll make another motion right now.
But Rob, can I ask a question?
sure, of course.
I thought I may have missed, I thought the language you proposed was changing the recommendation regarding paper streets, and instead that we would be recommending that the city council and the mayor considering possibly act on the issue of parking on paper streets. So to me, it was sort of the inverse as to what I thought we had voted. I thought at least the first clause that Dennis added made it clear it was the opposite, that we were not making a recommendation regarding parking on paper streets. Could you
Okay.
clarify that?
Now, this is the committee makes no recommendation. Is that the idea?
I thought your language was proposing that we make a recommendation urging the city to look into parking on paper streets.
And that's what I thought Dennis was suggesting when he said, let's wait for the city council to act. But let's get it. I mean, I don't think there's a big issue between us about what we're trying to say here. I think we're trying to say the committee makes no recommendation about paper streets. Show
I
us-
agree with that. I agree with that. And I think to your point, Rob, I believe you could almost end that one after the word street, put a period.
The committee makes no recommendation on paper streets.
Right.
Period.
On paper streets and former paper streets now zoned as open space off Cape Henlopen Drive and Cedar Street, period.
Right.
And strike
Is
all
it
the
all right,
rest of that
Dennis?
language. Is that right?
Dennis, is that all right?
I can live with that.
Hey, guys, and Lynn, I'm a little confused here. Are we not making a recommendation? And is that implying that we do not support the development of paper streets for parking?
Cleo, I think that when I made the motion on Cape and Lopen Drive, I should have worded it in that recommend that the committee recommend to city council that there not be parking places on the paper streets. And I would like to, on this particular item, correct that language. And I would be happy to make a motion that this committee recommends to city council that the paper streets and former paper streets on Cedar Street are not converted back to where that you could put designated parking areas on those streets.
Thank you, because that's my view, and so I was not going to support simply not making recommendation regarding paper streets, because to me that would imply that we were agnostic about it, and I don't think we were. I think many, at least I oppose developing paper streets for parking for a number of reasons, and so are you going to make this motion or a revised motion?
I'd be glad to.
Can I ask a question? I'm trying to figure out, it's very clear to me what you're looking at for Cape Henlopen Drive, because people currently don't park there. For the paper streets, former paper streets off of Cedar, are you recommending status quo? Or are you recommending that parking not be permitted? Because those are two different things. So in the motion, if you could try to be clear on that.
Yes. Okay, I understand what you're saying, Anne Marie. If I have more time, I write it out. But so can I revise my motion, withdraw and resubmit?
You certainly may. Let me.
Anne Marie, you help me out here if I don't clear it up here, but
I
I'll
can
make a
try.
motion that the paper streets, former paper streets now zoned open space off of Cedar Avenue remain status quo.
Off
Would that
Cedar.
cover it?
I'm sorry, Dennis. Go ahead, and I'll ask you questions afterward.
Okay, that remain status quo and not be there not be designated parking places placed on them. Anne Marie, is that safe enough?
That, yes,
Or could we say official parking spaces?
Designated, city
or
designated.
delineated.
spaces.
That's
City
another word that
designated
y'all.
spaces.
Yeah, yeah,
And that would mean that people can still park there. It's not prohibited, but we're
Right.
not going to put parking spaces in there and tell people that the public that that's where you could designate a parking place. Leave them like they are.
Let me give you some wording, Dennis, and you tell me if it's what you want. The paper streets and former paper streets now zoned as open space. You said on Cedar Avenue.
Off Cedar Street.
What about Cape Henlopen Drive?
Well, we did that one. I mean, if you want to include it, I can do that.
Well, when you say we did it, that's the.
Well, what we said there was we didn't make a motion one way or the other, but I can revise it to include that as well.
Okay, with open space and on Cape Henlopen Drive and Cedar Street. You said Cedar Avenue, but.
It's Cedar Street.
Okay. So here's what it says. The paper streets and former paper streets now zoned open space on Cape Henlopen Drive and Cedar Street remain status quo and should not be officially designated as public parking. Or but should not be officially designated.
Anne Marie, that do it?
Yes. Or maybe should not be improved for public parking.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
second.
All in, anybody want to discuss it more?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think I heard 4. And any opposed? I'm opposing.
I'm opposing.
Okay. The usual suspects on both sides. So then let's go to number 10. I think 10 we've got. Okay. 11. And let me ignore the numbers. We've got different numbers we're looking at.
Well, wait a minute, Rob. The next one up had to do with the permit system. Language was proposed on that one. Are we?
What we did. Oh, yes. Do you have it up, Anne Marie? I'm toggling back and forth between this. Yes. So here we are at what looks like number 9 here.
Which one?
Correct.
Yeah.
The new 9 on this version.
The council should favor.
And that's any objection to that edit?
Should
No.
favor.
Moving along then to the next one is refer the issue of bicycling, and there's no edit to that. Number 11. Well, no, not number 11. Consider, yes, the new 11. Consider expanding the number of bike racks at beaches 1 and 2 in Roosevelt Inlet and place bike posts. Any objection to that?
No,
I'm
Excellent.
okay.
Nope.
Nope.
It's especially useful to hear from people who weren't part of the editing team on this. Then the next is no parking signage, no edit to it. And then, Kevin, you want to talk to this a second?
We had this discussion earlier.
Yeah.
Just make sure that enforcement is not turned into, by our recommendation, a budget issue. I don't want to, even if additional personnel are not hired, I still think it is important that the rules, especially if you're going to have a permit system, are enforced. So I think we can stress that with the language, which I had shared earlier with the committee before that discussion, that have been included in here, and not simply say hire more seasonal personnel. I think hire more seasonal personnel does not reflect the totality of what's being proposed.
Okay, thank you for bringing us back to that. May I ask you questions about the wording in two places?
Sure.
You say giving special attention to compliance with the use of parking permits. That would be any parking permits. We don't have a yet.
That's a great, in the speed of trying to accommodate all of this, it probably should say with the use of permit parking. Is that where you wanted to go?
Compliance with the use of permit parking if adopted, I guess.
Right.
Okay, and then you say parking within designated parking areas. What did you mean?
If adopted.
Okay, well, if adopted in both cases. With that, I've got no objection to it. Does anybody else?
I'm okay.
I'm good.
Linda?
It's good.
Khalil?
Good.
All right. We've already deleted the next one. So now, zipping along, could you, Anne Marie,
2 hours.
scroll up? We have.
May I make a recommendation?
It's perfect.
Rob, may I make a recommendation?
Please.
I had drafted this. I thought it was important to explain at some point some of the challenges I felt with regard to the information that would have been helpful in the work of this committee. In the interest of time, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, I would be happy to write something up here in a concurring or dissenting opinion, whichever.
You muted yourself somehow, Kevin. Kevin, you're on mute. You're still muted.
Yeah, I can't hear.
I hope I'm back on. I apologize.
Well, the last thing we heard was concurring or dissenting opinion.
Right. I think this could be addressed perhaps more appropriately there, and the committee does not have to spend the time going through each one.
I would love that, frankly. We're over our time already. So
That's a consensus.
is that?
No, that was an attempt to do a gracious nod to the chairman.
It's a very and very gratefully accepted.
So moved.
All right. So is the rest of the committee okay with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Right, then I think we've got a product. I will turn out what I think we've done. And Kevin, I'll leave it to you. Do you want me to add yours as a concurring statement by Kevin McGinnis?
Sure, I will fit, but would you give me at least 24 hours just to clean that up?
Absolutely. I'll need 24 to clean this up.
Right.
So I think we're done. And we've talked about how we're going to handle the minutes, which is to send corrections individually to Janine. And if they conflict, and she'll get out what she thinks is the final. And if we object, we can object. Does that make sense?
Yes. I assume
How
you
do
will
we
be,
approve the final draft?
yeah, you'll be sharing a copy of your revision of the revision, Rob?
Of this, absolutely.
So, Rob, do you want to have one more meeting? So since you are going to be looking at incorporating significant changes, and
That does make sense.
I mean,
That does
so
make sense. We can handle the
this will go to council on February 8th. So if you met, anytime after next Tuesday, between Tuesday and Thursday, you could have a brief meeting just to make sure people review the document. And
that's a good idea, Anne Marie, because we got the minutes and this to deal with.
right. And I feel like you've covered a lot.
I feel the same way. So Tuesday, February 2nd is Groundhog Day. I'm good that day.
Somehow appropriate.
And Wednesday's also good. And Thursday, except we got an 11 o'clock council meeting, or a committee meeting, but otherwise we're good. Anybody have a problem with any of those 3 days?
No.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Rob, you said the second, and what other days?
Second, third, and fourth.
Okay, that works.
Depends on what time.
What time do you like, Dennis?
Oh, I'm open Tuesday, Monday, Wednesday in the morning.
Well, let's do Tuesday.
Tuesday,
Can we
Oh.
do Wednesday? Because Tuesday, we need to have the agenda posted today, which might be
Okay.
tight.
Good.
okay.
Dennis, what did you say about Wednesday?
Wednesday works for me.
Okay, morning and afternoon. Anybody have a problem with any time on Wednesday?
Anytime.
Morning would be my preference. I have appointment in the afternoon.
Okay, how about 10 o'clock on Wednesday?
Works
Wednesday the 3rd, correct?
Correct.
10 o'clock.
Perfect.
Okay,
All right, and the agenda will just be to review, not to reconsider, just to review this for compliance with what we agreed on today and in the minutes.
right.
Did anybody disagree with that?
No,
No, I'm fine.
Okay, because we don't want to be revisiting things at this late date. All right, thank you very much. Is
Wait a
there,
minute, before, I have one more thing.
please,
Excuse me. Committee members, I would like to collect from you all the binders that I provided you with all the photographs, images. And if you would please email me and tell me when I can stop by and pick them up from you, I would appreciate it.
Okay.
No problem.
to drop it off at your house or at
Okay.
City Hall as well.
Yeah,
and
You don't have to. I'll drop it.
Oh, sure, you could do that if you want, but, okay, whatever you'd like to do, Dennis, that's fine, but I'm happy to come by and pick up whatever works for you.
All right, I'll email you and we'll figure it out.
Janine, would you
Okay.
provide us with the chat transcript again, please?
I'll do that because it's gonna be on my computer.
Thanks, Anne Marie. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much.
Have a
Talk to you
Thank you.
on next Wednesday.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.